Great job, Josiah. That was wonderful. I'm excited. 1 o'clock today, Josiah and Lily and Emmy are going to get to participate in their first youth group trip along with a whole bunch of other folks, and Matthias. And a whole bunch of other folks are going to go to Louisville to work with the Wayside Christian Mission. And it's a fantastic ministry there. It's a model in the entire country of transitioning homeless people out of homelessness. And so we're going to get to participate there, and it's going to be really great. The graphic that you're seeing on the screen is for our fancy date night dinner, which is a fundraiser for the youth group. The youth group's going to be taking an extra day at Winterfest this year. They're going to go down on Thursday, going to really have some really good time to spend together. And so in order to pay for that extra day, we're going to transform this auditorium into a fancy 5-star restaurant. We're going to have our teenagers dressed in black slacks and white shirts, and they're going to be serving the food. We're hopefully going to have some live music. It's going to be really, really fun. And so if you're looking for a date night, then you can get tickets to that. Some of you already have. But also it's a great thing to invite people to. If you've got friends or neighbors or somebody else, the way that it works, some people have been a little confused about it, but we have tables of 6 at 15-minute increments. So you make a reservation for the time you want to come, and you'll be seated at a table. You buy a set of 2 tickets. If you want 1 ticket, talk to me. We can do that. It's just not set up that way, but we can do that. But or if you want 3 tickets, we can do that. But you'll be at a table with other people, and then you'll get the full attention of the teenagers that serve your food. That way, we'll stagger. 15 minutes later, another group will come in, another group, and you can stay as long as you want. We'll have a bunch of tables set up. But that way you'll get the full service. So it's going to be a really, really fun night, and we'll have photos. You'll get your photo made. It's going to be really cool. So there's some flyers up. We had the cards. The cards are out in the lobby. If you want to give that to a friend and have a friend come, or if you want to buy tickets, that's going to be a lot of fun. I grew up in Detroit, and in Detroit, everybody in Detroit is very, very patient. No, really, really. We learned it through suffering by being Lions fans. So if you're a fan of the Detroit Lions, you just suffer. They're the team that can never get it done. They were actually the team, before the Super Bowl era, they had won more football championships than anybody else. I mean, they were the titan of professional football. But something about the Super Bowl, they've just never been able to get there. They've never, even when they're incredible, even when they're on the doorstep, it all falls apart. And we don't know why. It's just the curse of being a Lions fan. And so we suffer. We understand the Cubs fans and what the Red Sox fans went through. I mean, because that's us, right? But we do have one thing in our favor. We have the best mascot. Right, Jeff? I mean, it is the most ferocious mascot. You want to be a fan of a football team, be a fan of a lion, right? I mean, seriously, I just want you to think about this. Don't think about it in terms of football teams. Just think about it in terms of a fight. Who's going to win, a lion or a dolphin? I think a lion's going to win. Yeah, that's right. How about this one? A lion or a horse? Yeah, no, that lion is taking down that horse. A lion or a cow? The cow's going to beat the lion? A lion or a flock of birds? I'm just not betting on the birds. Or, for some reason, some people think it's a good idea to put people against lions. Paul Revere, a steel worker, a gold miner, or some guy from Texas. I don't think any of them are beating a lion. Or if, you're unfortunately from Cleveland, then it's a lion versus a color. And I don't think that's going to work out too well. I say this just to illustrate the fact that lions, the actual animal lions, are terrifying animals, right? There's a reason they're called the king of the jungle. You don't want to mess with one. There's hardly a beast on the face of the earth that invokes more fear than the lion. I mean, maybe the great white shark. That might be the only animal that people are more afraid of than a lion. Do you know that a male lion can weigh 400 to 500 pounds? Can sprint about 35 miles an hour, and can leap more than 30 feet horizontally. They are incredible animals. Hundreds of people a year are killed by lions, and they're known to plunder livestock throughout Africa and Asia. One of the most published stories about the dangers of lions came from Kenya in 1898. The Kenya-Uganda Railway was putting a bridge over the Savo region of Kenya when two abnormally large lions began attacking the workers. One of the lions was over 10 feet long from tip of its nose to tip of its tail. Over a period of 9 months, these two lions were responsible for dozens of verified deaths and possibly hundreds of others. They would stalk the workers' camps at night, sneaking into their tents and dragging them away. News agencies around the world began to report about how all these workers were being killed, and eventually the workers fled the camps. They refused to work on the bridge anymore. They would build barriers of thistles and thorns. It didn't keep the lions out. They built steel embankments. It didn't keep the lions out. Finally, they had to hire a few ex-military hunters and trackers to track down the lions and kill them before they could resume work on the bridge. What I really like about the story is the Lord Salisbury, who's got the best name in the history of names, but Lord Salisbury, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, spoke to the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and this is the completely indifferent and uncaring speech he gave. The whole of the works were put to a stop because a pair of man-eating lions appeared in the local... Let me try again. The whole of the work was put to a... No, I can't do the accent. Anyway. The whole of the work was put to the stop because a pair of man-eating lions appeared in the locality and conceived a most unfortunate taste for our workmen. At last, the laborers entirely declined to carry on unless they were guarded by iron entrenchments. Of course, it's difficult to work on a railway under these conditions, and until we found an enthusiastic sportsman to rid these lions, our enterprise was indeed seriously hindered. This is reported all over the world, and it led to a heightened fear of lions. A lot of the fear of lions that we have today actually go back to that incident and the news reporting that was around it. But it turns out that what we learned from this is that lions are pretty dangerous animals, right? But not this lion, and not this lion, and apparently not this one, because we have figured out how to put our head in the mouth of a lion, or at least the dumber of our species has figured out how to do that. And sometimes we're not even afraid of these kind of lions, the ones that we decorate our kids' rooms with. We have a weird relationship with lions. On one hand, we're terrified of them. We realize how powerful and ferocious they are. And on the other side, we make them these snuggly little kid toys, right? We decorate nurseries with them. Kids have stuffed lions. We make movies about them. And we just think they're so cuddly and cute, like they're big house cats. And if you think that this is silly, I mean, what's the last time you saw a nursery that was decorated with great white sharks or tarantulas? We don't do it. But for some reason, we have this really strange, weird relationship with lions. There's even the ancient Greek myth about Androcles. You might remember this from school. Androcles was thrown into a lion's den, a prison, to be eaten by the lions. But when he got there, he noticed the lion was limping, and so he realized the lion had a big thorn in its paw. And Androcles tended to the lion and removed the thorn from its paw, and because of that, the lion became his devoted friend. Later, Androcles was thrown into the Colosseum to fight against wild animals, and when the trap door opened and the lion burst out, it was the same lion. And much to the amazement of the emperor and everyone involved, the lion just came over and nuzzled him and snuggled with him, and he rode it around the arena. And so we have these really weird duality about lions: fear and fascination, terror and love. So when C.S. Lewis authored his classic The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as an analogy for the gospel, who better to portray Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, than the king of the jungle himself, a lion named Aslan. Now, if you're wondering where this is going, today our lesson on the tension in the Bible is between the fear of God and the love of God. Now, we've been talking for several weeks about these tensions in the Bible, about how the Bible is not intended to be reconciled into one perfect system, one systematic theology that all makes sense and works in human logic. God is mystery. God is infinite. He's immeasurable. He's beyond us. And even his revelation in the Bible, which we know is only in part, we see now in part, one day we'll see in full. It's like looking at a reflection in a dim mirror. Even that is too much for us to understand. It's too much for us to grasp. We can't fully comprehend it. And so in God's mystery, he's left us at times with, I believe, intentional tensions in the Word of God. Things that seem to contradict each other, and they're not intended to be resolved. And in the tension, like a tug of war, when both teams are pulling on the rope as hard as they can and it's going nowhere, and that rope is under incredible strain, in that tension where we're at the center and we're being pulled by these things, what do? We struggle. We struggle and we begin to work out who God is by being in the middle. If it was all neatly resolved, there'd be no struggle. There'd be no need for us to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And one of these tensions that we find in the Bible over and over is the idea that we are supposed to, we're even commanded to fear God, and also that God desires to have this intimate, personal, loving relationship with us. And if you really think about it, which one is it? How can it be both? Do we fear him or love him? Is Jesus a lion or is he a lamb? So let's see what some major characters in the Bible have to say about this. We'll start with Moses. In Deuteronomy 10:12, Moses says this, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul?" But then in Deuteronomy 6:5, Moses says this, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." Doesn't it seem strange that Moses says, fear God and love God? Yeah, I don't generally love people that I fear. If I'm genuinely, truly afraid of someone, I don't often want to buy them roses. It's just not an instinct that I have, right? I don't tend to mix those two emotions very often. I think there's only one thing that I've ever feared and loved, and that's the Haunted Mansion at Disney World. I was afraid of it when I was a kid. It was terrifying. Then I wrote it and I loved it. I mean, we don't generally mix real fear and real love. And yet, here we're being commanded by Moses. Well, what about in the book of Hebrews? In the book of Hebrews 12:18 and following, it says, "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for God is a consuming fire." I was in Malibu a couple of years ago, and I was there about 6 months after the wildfires that swept through in the Paradise wildfires. And you know what? The people there were still incredibly shaken. The fires were out. They were gone. They were done. But they were traumatized. A consuming fire is a terrifying thing. I knew some students who last year were setting off fireworks in a field, and the field lit fire, and it started to spread all around them. And about 8 acres burned, and they were trapped in the middle in a little tiny island. They had to be rescued out of the center of this. Those kids were terrified. Those parents were terrified. A consuming fire is not a fun little campfire. A consuming fire is something to be scared of. So when he says, worship God with reverence and awe because he's a consuming fire, it's kind of like Smokey the Bear saying, don't mess with the fire here. Don't make sure you put it out. If you start a forest fire, it's going to consume everything and kill you. Be careful. And yet, in the book of Hebrews, it also says this, 4:16, "Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace, or find help in our time of need." Again, which is it? Is God this terrifying, consuming fire that we need to be very careful with? Or is God someone we can just walk right up to his throne and say, "Hey, I'm here, I need your help"? Because those images don't really seem to be the same thing. Jesus himself, he says in Luke 12:4-5, "I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body and after that can do no more, but I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him whom after the body has been killed has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him." And just verses later, in 12:32, he says, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." Okay, sometimes we make fun of the disciples for not getting it. We're like, okay, come on, guys. It's pretty obvious. You know, what are you doing here? I'm with them on this one. Okay, Jesus, which is it? Like, be terrified of God because he can throw me in hell? Or be so happy because he loves me and he gave me the kingdom? Which one are we talking about here? The Apostle John, in 1 John 4:16, he says, God is love. Whoever lives in this love lives in God, and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us so that we'll have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world we are like Jesus. There's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Okay, John's resolving it. If God loves us, that love we have for God that should drive the fear about, we shouldn't be afraid anymore until the book of Revelation. And the same John in the book of Revelation says this, then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. And he said in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water. Okay, are you with me now? See the tension? In the Bible, we have a very strong tension here between a command to fear an awesome and powerful God, a lion, somebody who is terrifying with power, who's way more than you are, who's a consuming fire. And then we have all these commands that say, hey, God loves you. He wants to be with you. He doesn't want you to be afraid. He wants you to approach him. He wants to pour out his mercy and grace on you. He wants to be in a relationship with you. And we're sitting here holding both ends of this, and it's kind of like somebody tied a rope onto both wrists, and they're pulling us in half. So Aslan, Lewis chose a lion to represent the almighty, terrible, awesome power and strength of God. And when the children at the center of the story are told about the King of Narnia, they assume he's a man. But once they're told that he's a lion, they get a little nervous. And this is the conversation that unfolds. Susan, is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. Mrs. Beaver, if there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or just silly. Lucy, then he isn't safe? Mr. Beaver, safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you. I love that line. Safe? Who said anything about safe? He's a lion, for goodness sake. But he is good. You can trust him. And that's all that really matters. Our God is not safe. If you came here this morning thinking that our God is safe, you are mistaken. Our God is not some toothless, soft-edged, cuddly puppy dog. He is a lion. He is a consuming fire. He is dangerous. He holds lightning in his fist. He commands the weather with a whisper. The question of whether or not you will draw your next breath is in his hands and his hands alone. He's not safe. If anything, we have crossed out the verses in our Bibles that speak to God's power, his wrath, his awesome and terrible presence. The fact that anyone who saw God fell to their feet and said things like, away from me, for I'm a sinner, or, oh, surely I will now die because I've seen the face of the Lord. That was the reaction people had. No, he's not safe at all. And yet, with all of the fear that we're commanded to have towards him, for every verse about fearing God, we find another that says, do not fear. For every verse commanding silence, we have another that tells us to speak up and tell him our cares, no matter how trivial. Where we have verses that say, you should be afraid of the one who could throw you into hell, we have other verses that say, doesn't he care for you more than the sparrows? Let's look at a few more verses. Let's look at how we approach God. In Ecclesiastes 5, it says, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know what they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. And in Hebrews 4:16, it says, let us then approach the grace of God, the throne of God, with confidence so that we may find mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. Again, how do we approach God? With fear and trembling and silence, but with confidence, speaking up and telling him what we need. Both at the same time. How about speaking to God? There's a bunch of verses about this. Zephaniah 1:7. Be silent before the Lord your God, for the day of the Lord is near. Habakkuk 2:20. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. But then Philippians 4:6. In everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. Romans 8:15. You have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Abba is a word that is the equivalent of dada in our language. Dada, papa, daddy. It's what a child would first say to refer to their father. Children aren't usually silent, even sometimes when we want them to be. Right? And so here we have this, be silent before the Lord, and then we have, hey, God figures you're like a baby and you're just going to babble and talk, and he loves it because you're talking to him and because you're calling him daddy. And again, we have this great tension. We serve a God who is both a lion and a lamb. The temptation is to resolve it. The temptation is to edit it and to say, oh, in the Bible, when it says fear God, that really means respect. So let's just cross fear out and let's write respect, and then we can harmonize it. Because then we say, oh, you don't have to be afraid of God. Just respect him in love, and then it all goes together. That's not what it means. Yes, it means respect, but it means more than respect. It means awe. It means terror. It means understanding that he's in heaven and you're on earth. There are days when I pray and I just start out, God, here's what I need. Here's what I want. And there are days that I pray and I go, God, I don't need to say anything. You're in heaven and I'm on earth, and you're God and I'm not. And I'm lucky to even be able to speak to you at all. So I'm just going to honor you. And both have to happen because we live in the tension. If we forget one and we turn God into this toothless, soft-edged, cuddly puppy dog, where does holiness go? Well, God doesn't really care. Just do whatever I want because he's going to forgive me anyway. But if we forget the other and we turn God into this terrifying taskmaster, this lion with his claws out, then we live in fear. And what do? Then we mirror that to other people and we take the position of God and we get the claws out on them. We have to live in the tension of both, of knowing that God has the power to be terrifying, but he loves us so much that he doesn't want us to be afraid. He is ferociously powerful. He deserves our full respect and reverence, but he also is humble to the point of meekness and desires us to be in relationship with him, caring about every hair on our head. Those two things are not meant to be resolved. We can't put God, who is mystery, into a tidy little box. We work out our salvation here with fear and trembling. So he is the God of the universe, the creator of all, but he's also a loving parent with a child in his arms. Safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he is good. Before we close, I wonder if this lesson, this tension, might leave you feeling a bit confused. You might be saying right now, how can I coexist in my body fear of God and love of God? So I want to end with a real illustration of a real person from the Bible, the Apostle John, who lived this, perhaps in a deeper way than we can even understand. So I want to start in the Last Supper on John 13. After he had said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, "Very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me." His disciples stared at each other at a loss to know which one of them he meant. But one of them, the disciple who Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. This is the Apostle John. John referred to him as the apostle who Jesus loved, in part because it was not appropriate in writing at that time to refer to yourself by name. And so this was a pseudonym as me, the author. But also because John was in Jesus' inner circle. He was very close to him. Some have speculated John may have been a boyhood friend of Jesus. They may go back a long way. But they were very, very close. And John is here seated next to Jesus. They're seated at the floor around a low table. They would have their left hand on the floor, their right hand at the table. And John is there right next to him, leaning against him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, ask him which one he means. Well, I was thinking Peter is being close to Jesus, but John at this moment is actually physically closer to Jesus. And it says, leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? And so here in this moment of vulnerability for Jesus, of pain for Jesus, Jesus is reclining like this, and John is reclining next to him and leans into him, cheek to cheek, to speak to him. You know, I think about this, John reclining against Jesus, and it reminds me of when my kids were younger, and we would sit on the couch and watch a movie, and I would sit down, and one of them would sit kind of next to me, almost in my lap, and they'd lean back, their shoulders against my chest, and I'd put my arm around them like this, and we could just sit there for hours. There's just an intimacy and a closeness of leaning back and reclining against somebody. I love y'all. I'm not going to recline against you guys. I'm just not going to happen, you know? There is a certain intimacy and closeness of leaning your body and embracing someone. And John and Jesus are so close at this point that John leans into Jesus' personal space, his body against his shoulders against his cheek against cheek, and speaks to him. This is the God of the universe, but he's so close with John. And then Jesus dies. And John stands at the cross and watches not only his Lord, but his best friend be crucified. And Jesus is put in the grave. And Jesus resurrects, and he's with them, but then he ascends into heaven. And decades go by. Decades and decades. And now John is an old man. And he receives a vision on the Isle of Patmos in the book that we call Revelation. And he misses his friend. I mean, we all long to see Jesus, but John also misses his friend, who he physically knew, who he reclined against. And in this vision, he's so blessed to actually get to, for the first time in decades and decades, to actually see his friend, Jesus, to see him there. And this is what happens in Revelation chapter 1. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned around, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest. The hair on his head was white as wool and white as snow. And his eyes were like a blazing furnace. His feet were like bronze glowing in the furnace. And his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held the 7 stars. And coming out of his mouth was a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all of its brilliance. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Now John doesn't tell us he was terrified, but I'm guessing he was. When he saw his friend Jesus in all of his glory and all of his radiance, and words, all these beautiful words that John used can't even begin to describe the moment. John fell at his feet like a dead man. The same Jesus he had reclined against cheek to cheek. He fell at his feet like a dead man. In John's own body, he experienced both the intimate love of God that knew him and saw him and loved everything about him. And he also experienced the dread and terror at the awesome glory of the God of the universe. So, if you struggle with how to reconcile those two things in your heart, you're in pretty good company. You're in pretty good company. You see, fear of God and love of God not only can coexist, they must coexist. We must never turn the Lion of Judah into a house cat. But we also know that he doesn't desire our fear. When he tells us do not fear, he means it. He wants us to know him, and he wants to know us. He wants us to love him, and he loves us. He wants us to walk with him and face life together with him. And when we are filled with awe for God and we experience his love for us, then we truly begin to know him. If you don't know him today, if you've walked through this life thinking of him as a house cat, as a puppy dog, or if you've walked through life thinking of him as a cruel taskmaster, as a lion with his claws out, and you want to know the real Jesus, the real God of the universe. You want to know the God who deserves your respect, deserves for you to fall to your knees trembling before him, but also will grab you by the hand and lift you up and pull you into an embrace. You have the opportunity. You can accept to live in the tension. Because there's another tension that we live in. And this is the last week of this series. So I won't preach a whole sermon on it. But there's a tension that we live in every day. And that tension is between heaven and earth. Because our feet are in the mud and our hands are raised to God. And you and me, every one of us, we're here. This is where we are. And that's not going to change. For every day, for the rest of your life, your feet are going to be in the mud. You're going to walk through difficult things. You're going to have to deal with the results of other people's sin and of your own. But if your hands are raised to God, he's reaching down and he's going to grab your hand. And we will leave this mud. And the tension will be over. And we will be with God. And so if today you want to enter into that new reality where you live in the tension between heaven and earth, but you know you don't have to stay there forever, you can do that. You can be baptized. You can die in this water. Not physically. I'm not going to hold you down under there. But the old you can die. And the new you, the resurrected you, can walk out to newness of life. And you can stand with your hands raised to God and say, now I'm yours, and I'm not going to be stuck in this mud forever. I'm not going to be stuck in this tension forever. So if you want to know God, if you want to know Jesus, you have that opportunity. You can come down to the front. You can grab somebody next to you. You can go to the back. You can wave your hand, spin in circles. You can give me a call or a text this afternoon. One of the shepherds, somebody else here that you trust. But you have the opportunity. Let's stand together. Let's finish in